TapRoot is actually, it is a automated platform where we're using a mobile application for caregivers to be able to de-escalate Alzheimer's and dementia facilities. Our first
related behaviors.
Yeah, related behaviors. And our first target is within assisted living facilities, because that's predominantly where Alzheimer's dementia patients reside. But we do have aspirations one day of having the in-home version as well. The benefit of being able to automate is that we can run all kind of outcomes data and demonstrate return on investment, because data like this has not been available within the senior and assisted living community to the extent that even the insurance companies would like for it to be. So we see it as a real benefit for insurance companies that they can get this kind of data, for facilities who can better care for their residents, as well as for the resident and family members themselves.
I can't sleep, but I dream big.
So I've been doing this for about 10 years from a consulting standpoint. I actually worked for a health plan prior, where we would see escalated behaviors from someone who has Alzheimer's dementia. And what would end up happening is we'd have to send them out to a higher level of care. So if they're at home, we'd have to put them in assisted living or a secured memory unit or even a hospital. And that costs a lot of money. From a health plan perspective, you're like, okay, what can we do to decrease that cost? And so we developed these behavior programs where we train staff on non-pharmaceutical methods to prevent or decrease Alzheimer's adverse behaviors. And there's 25 different behaviors that we actually identified. So resisting showering, not allowing you to change them. They're not eating. They will refuse to take their medications. They try to leave and escape. And so there are things that you can say and do to help prevent and reduce those type of behaviors. Wow. So I've been doing that for a very long time. And over time, you start noticing there's patterns and there's threads of where behavior is going, and ways that you can actually tell or inform a caregiver on things to say or not say or do to prevent these behaviors. And because we saw that, I saw that through my career doing it manually, I thought if we did it from an algorithm standpoint and train the algorithm to look, so we ask questions like a therapist does. I'm a therapist by trade. So you ask questions, if this, then the answer is this, and you go back and forth with behaviors. So if we do the same thing for someone with Alzheimer's dementia, we ask questions, where is it happening? What are they doing? Are they yelling? Are they kicking? All of those things are indications for what they're trying to tell you, but they can't express because they don't have a short-term memory. They can't tell you that. And so we've been able to see that type of pattern and come up with an intervention that has successfully prevented it or reduced these type of behaviors. So we're now using this manual process that I've been doing for a decade and automating it.
What exacerbates the problem is there's a very high turnover of caregivers within these assisted living facilities. You can imagine it's high degree of burnout. You can imagine it is also a very modest paying role. And therefore, we have been able to document somewhere between 40 and 75% turnover of caregivers in this population. So you don't get a lot of knowledge transfer that goes on with the patient. So you could imagine being able to have a digital assistant in the form of a mobile application, which could store this information so that even if you hired a brand new caregiver, they very quickly could come up to speed on what are the most common behaviors that this particular individual displays, and what are the best techniques to calm them down, to de-escalate that behavior so that they can provide the best care possible.
When it's time to get to bed with a head full of dreams.
I started in 2019. So during the first quarter of 2019, I used some of just my history and connections within the community to locate and hire a technical team to actually work with us to devise the first crude database so that we could do a proof of concept. Could we have a predictive analytics component that would be accurate? So after about, I would say, 8 months of loading in data, our first proof of concept point demonstrated that in the behavior of resisting showers, we had about a 98% likelihood of selecting the proper intervention to de-escalate that behavior. That gave us some confidence going into early 2020 that we should continue to go forward. Fast forward into the first quarter of 2020, we looked again at the data and saw that we had been able to reduce psychotropic medications by 13% in this patient population. Now, we want to be very clear. Psychotropic medications are useful tools in this patient population, nor are we physicians that prescribe or inform a physician of what to do. However, as a behavioral scientist, what Linda has been able to successfully do in her practice is by using these techniques, we ask the prescribing physician to reconsider the medications. And their judgment, we have been able to document that if you will use these behavioral interventions, you can de-escalate or reduce these psychotropic meds. That's really reducing the sedative effect, which has a positive benefit of less falls in this senior population, where they're have a very high propensity of falling. And so that's just some real knock-on effects. So not only are we decreasing meds, or what we would like to say is appropriately using psychotropic meds in this population, but we also know that it's decreasing the fall risk, which ultimately will decrease hospitalizations. So that kind of gave us our second target that we knew we were on track. And from that, we've really been going as fast as we can here in 2020 as second quarter until now. We launched our MVP into assisted living facilities. We've got our first user feedback because we're constantly looking at the product market fit. And we started developing our second generation mobile application in the August timeframe, and it should be ready in just the next couple of weeks. So the fourth quarter will be deploying that. Well, COVID has impacted this. There's no doubt about it. And it actually caused us to do a little bit of a pivot, which I'll ask Linda to speak about.
Yeah, the first, probably around March, April, I wasn't able to go into the facilities any longer, which was fine because I trained the caregivers to do a Zoom or over the phone, because we don't need to see the patients. It's all about the caregivers. And got a lot of phone calls from the families, just, we can't go in, we don't know what's happening with our loved one. And when we finally do get a hold of someone, a caregiver or staff, they're trying to, again, how educated they are and what to say and what not to say. And I mean, you always want to, be able to give an appropriate update to the family member. So we actually created a family update within our mobile app that will give a push notification to the family that tells them, yes, your loved one has done fantastic in activities today. They ate, 90% of their meal, things like, so we have a family update function now that came out of COVID, which was really helpful.
It calls us to think a little differently, because we certainly recognize, regardless of what happens with COVID, because we certainly all hope that begins to diminish, into 2021, we're always going to recognize this is a high-risk population. We always lose some residents to the flu during flu season. So I think we learned a lot just around how to best care for the senior population living in these assisted facilities, and the fact that family members are always going to want more information than the facility is able to give them. So any way that we can support that, we certainly want to try and do. And so we kind of built this automated function within it. And I can say it really helps when you have facilities that will work with you so that you can get real life feedback from caregivers, from your executive directors and your owners, because all of these individuals are stakeholders. We've been very fortunate to have a good group of advisors on our advisory board. So they're from insurance companies, they're owners, they're business individuals, and we are touching base with them routinely to ensure that we're getting feedback from them, but at the same time, making sure that they're keeping us, on track and honest about what's really happening in these facilities.
It's the same, it's everything. Hard to gain perspective when
I'll say COVID was tough, just because Linda got totally locked out and unfortunately did lose some patients during that process. And so that's always very, very, very tough. And while Linda said that she doesn't really interact with a specific patient, you really get to know these patients via the caregivers who are interacting with them every day. And the caregivers were extremely stressed through all of this. And I can remember one time Linda just doing a stress reduction for caregivers. And that was like a whole series of trainings on just trying to ensure that they were taking care of themselves. So I would say that was a learning. Secondly, it's about scaling in this, this population. Facilities have been overwhelmed. So it's very hard to have additional conversations right now. I would say just now, as we're into the fourth quarter of 2020, facilities are willing to pick up the phone and have a little bit more of a dialogue with him. If Linda had not have already had such a reputation in the space and facilities that she was working with, it would be very difficult to get new facilities. They're totally overwhelmed, and they've actually been, they've had to alter their budgets and purchase more PPP than was original on their, PPE more than what was on their, in their original budgets. And so that has equally been something that we think is going to level out in 2021. But I'm actually glad that we didn't have a broad launch in 2020 because it would have been blunted for sure.
Yeah, it would have been. They would have put it on the back. They wouldn't even allow, I don't think they would even have the time because there's policies and things are changing all the time with COVID rules. And I talk to them all the time and they're like, we just don't have time to, it's unfortunate, but it's a great learning lesson. And I think that we're now better prepared to do a full launch in 2021.
Our tech team is just outstanding. We have made, when we actually, during the summer, in the July timeframe, we made a decision to just go build the second generation mobile app. The application that we knew we could launch. You could say part of that might be because you couldn't expand the way that you wanted to in the first generation app, or you could, say, look, we've got this time, we've got a technical team, let's just pay the money and make this happen. And that's kind of the decision that we made. And we're very happy about that. Not only were we able to get our mobile app, we were able to get the web application and a whole series of reports designed, which will be part of our product offering. So that part, I think, has been a real opportunity for us.
Yeah, I know it's the dough, it's the show that got me all froze. And
I feel so fortunate to be a part of this group. My background has really been in big pharma, medical device, in vitro diagnostics. So I kind of came at the company and healthcare a little bit more through that direction. The opportunity to be in this group, which is very technical based, very SaaS based, has been a blessing for me because the business is different. So I'm a little bit of a hybrid. We're really at the intersection of healthcare, AI, behavior health, and clinical management. Right. And so it has been so helpful to have my colleagues in the collective to where I could learn from, I could, share the knowledge that I've acquired over my career and to develop some real friendships out of this. I'm just thrilled to be a part of it.
Change my whole life and running out of gas. Tell me who goes
by far the people. By far. It's really interesting. I mean, I have been a part of other leader, CEO, C-level executive groups. And I think, you always mine for the pearls. But you send out a note to this group asking for a suggestion, and I would tell you, you will get, flooded, 5 to 7 responses very quickly that are exactly what you're looking for. And that is so valuable when you have people that are in the trenches. Secondly, the individuals who are in mature companies, either they've had an exit or they are well down the path of scaling their companies, open the door, have reached out to me personally to see, can they help me? And it is, I've actually never had that. I'm in the, I'd like to consider the mid-lat part of my career, but I've actually never had people send me an email saying, Scarlett, let me know how I can help you. And just shoot me a time and we can talk for 20 minutes. And that is fabulous when you have those kinds of anchors of people who have done it, who are doing it right now, open their Rolodex and open time. And I love it. I think it's a culture. And I think it's a culture that, the leaders, the board, has for the startup AZ, I think they are the ones that are setting that tone and leading by example. And it's penetrating, through our workshops, it's penetrating through our retreats. And that's what culture is about.
I'm liking my chances, but I don't say jack.
We'll be deploying our the mobile app in all 5 of our facilities, which is really exciting. We're working with the company right now to have our training library up and ready to go. We have the trainings ready, but actually showing the caregivers and the executive directors on how to really utilize that training, which will be a cost savings to them, of course, because it's really hard to send staff out for training. So we made these trainings into 3 to 5 minute vignettes. They'll have it right at the palm of their hand. So it's really using these other features that we're going to be deploying in November. The senior living space is reaching that point of where technology is going to have to help them. And there's a lot of companies out there that help to track for urinary tract infections or fall risks and things like that, and that's great. But when you're talking about Alzheimer's dementia space, there's nothing out there for behaviors and how to actually manage this. And 90% of people with Alzheimer's dementia diseases will have an adverse behavior. So it's a very high likelihood, obviously, with 90%. Right now, the only way that we train caregivers who care for this population is through formal trainings, your online, go to conferences, webinars, things like that, which can take, an hour, 2 hours, all day trainings or a week training. And they have to remember all that information like regular trainings do until the next conference or next year. Well, that isn't necessarily the way adult learners really will retain the information, especially if you're a caregiver doing this every day. You need it at the palm of your hands. And also with the caregiver turnover that Scarlett was talking about, there's not enough caregivers that are going to be around. And so now you're going to have inexperienced people coming in and the turnover of new caregivers coming in and out of these facilities. This is going to allow even these facilities to expand and have a better quality of care. And right now it's all manual process. So this is going to allow it to be automated.
Just punctuating that point. When you think about like the top 10, most costly diseases, you immediately go to hypertension, diabetes. There are treatments to there's, we can control some of that with diet and exercise and treatments. Alzheimer's dementia, there really isn't anything that can prevent, slow down, or a medication that can alter dementia Alzheimer's. We applaud and all the groups that are continuing to try to work into that space, whether it be, medical device and brain stimulation, or whether it be, biopharma, looking for drugs to impact the space. But, unfortunately, it has not been very successful to date. But as Linda was saying, these behaviors are going to present themselves. And what we're trying to do is provide a tool for caregivers, first in facilities and eventually at home, to be able to de-escalate and prevent these behaviors. It's the safest way to provide quality care.
And there's just nothing out there, like I said, it's just training right now, or you have to hire a psychologist or some form of a consultant in this space, but that's not scalable. We've done that in Arizona. There's a handful of us that actually do it, but it's just not enough of us to be able to do it. And again, we're wanting to keep these folks at the lowest level of care, not start off at the highest level of care, which is where we're at, unfortunately, at this point.
Clearly, it's about surrounding yourself with talent. And when you're a startup, you don't have any money to go hire that talent. So I would say, look for groups that you can surround yourself and create camaraderie with people who are talented in the space. Number two, recruit an advisory board. And when you do that recruitment, you've got to make sure that you now are making milestones, your estimated milestone attainment, and then being accountable to that group of, are you achieving your milestones? What pivots did you have to make? There's always been a startup community that worked from home. COVID forced everyone to go home. And I think if you can lose the days very, very quickly if you aren't really staying on top of what are your goals and how are you achieving those and what are those next priorities so that you can continue to maintain that momentum. And I think COVID taught us all, that and punctuated that for us. So what I would say is really use that. And then lastly, it's never too early to start talking to potential investors, but don't ask them for investment. Start asking them for advice, get advice on your pitch deck, and then close with, is this a space you're interested with? And would you like to be kept apprised of the milestones as we continue to gather, speed and momentum? So it's really those three things. It's about talent, find it anywhere you can as cheaply as you can. Part of that is getting an advisory board, making sure that you are being accountable to a timeline to this group of people, and then start conversations with colleagues around investment as soon as you can, but don't make the mistake of asking for investments up front. Ask for advice. That's probably what I would say.
Yeah.
No,
I totally agree. 100%.
But I dream big. A good evening.